Hey everyone, and today I'm going to be interviewing my best friend, Belle too, and how she and Brett got into her property investment journey. As you may know, I've come from the creative side and discussed in the previous episode about how we began renovating. Brett and Belinda have definitely got a different approach to property investment, and I can't wait to hear her story. So, can you share with our listeners today about how you and Brett got into buying property?
Yeah, hi Belinda. You're exactly right that you come from a creative side and Brett and I come from, I guess, more the facts and figures side. And because of that, and because I've always tried to do better with what income that we've had. So one day I was watching Oprah. I think this was really a changing point in my life. It was around about 2002, and she was interviewing a guy called Robert Kiyosaki, and he was talking about his newly released book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And I just heard his story and I thought that there might be something in it for Brett and I did really want some change, or big changes really. And so I went and bought that book. I gave it to Brett and said, "Read this, honey." Which he did, and came home and said, "Yeah, I really loved it." And we started to buy some property investment books. So I started to look at gurus that were around back then, like Steve McKnight, Rick Otten, and they all had different themes on property, different ways of investing, and we just took it all in. We jumped on forums, we listened to what everybody had to offer. Jan Summers was back, she was around back then. There were talks about positive cash flow versus negatively geared properties, and so we just completely immersed ourselves in it back then. And we started to hook up with some people who were interested in buying property, not just here but also overseas, via our forums, and lots of things happened, I guess. Before then we bought a unit. We'd started as a young couple together. We were married. I was 22 and Brett was 23, which is really, really young when I think about it now. And he had just put down a few $1,000s on a unit at Cronulla deposit. And his auntie had given him a couple of $1,000s to start. And then he was an apprentice mechanic, so we have come from digs where we haven't had a lot of money.
Low incomes.
Yeah, definitely.
Incomes.
Ordinary, average Aussie incomes is how I describe ourselves. And I was just very newly starting in the police force. And so I was on the junior wage, and off we went together. And he put all of his wage basically into this unit at Cronulla that we rented out, paid $53,000 for it, and I used to pay for our nights out and petrol and basically whatever else we needed. And we got stuck in and pulled out the kitchen, redid the kitchen because it was poor. The unit was cheap. I don't even know why we thought it was a good idea to do it, but we could see from way back in our first property the benefit of buying something that was underdone, that was unrenovated, that was unfinished, rather than pay a premium for something that looked and smelt nice.
So how much did you pay for that property?
$53,000. It smelt like baby's vomit. So other buyers were walking in and walking out. My mother-in-law stood there and cried and said, "I can't believe you're going to move my son into this house." But both of Brett and I knew that with a few small changes we'd be okay, and this was a great starting place for us.
So you repainted?
Yep. We repainted that, think back in the 80s, blue tiles, pink tiles in bathroom. I think it actually had a pink toilet back then. So we repainted whatever we could to more neutral colours. We repainted the lounge room, the bedrooms, ripped off the curtains, ripped out part of the kitchen. Part of the kitchen we painted up, but we put in a new breakfast bar and added some new appliances and some better storage. And so we were in that unit for 18 months, year and a half. And the market started to move back then. It was around about 1987. We were married in 86. And we were offered $76,000 for that unit, so we took it.
Great. And did you have any children at that stage?
No, none.
No children?
None.
Okay.
BC, before children. before chaos, BC. So after that, we were thinking about buying a house in some great areas around the Sutherland Shire. We're Shire people. and may never leave.
Me too. Very proud of it.
And may never leave. And so we started to look around. We found that there were waterfronts at Kurnell that were around about 100,000 or less, and for the same amount we could get a large block of land in Kurnell or an old house in Kurnell for just under the 100 was around about the same as we were paying for a better standard of house in Caringbah, Miranda, some areas of Cronulla, etc.
Without views.
Without the view and without the access to the water. And beyond that, I was crazy mad on horse riding. So
I remember that. I loved horses. You loved horses. Teen ranch days.
yeah,
But I remember you pursued your passion for horses.
loved horses. So this house allowed us to build stables up in a backyard, which was a childhood dream come true, really,
Yeah.
for me. So, and then we ended up with 2 horses. The stables were approved before the house was actually approved. We had to get fences up because we'd already bought a dog. The animals came first, way before the children. But basically we bought that for 92,000, that block of land. We built a new house. It cost us about 350,000 all up to build the house. We built downstairs first and filled in upstairs. The external walls and the roof was completed. And then as we'd earned some money over the next few years, because we were mortgaged quite highly, we would just finish off a room.
I remember that. I remember doing it bit by bit.
Yeah. Insulation and gyprock to finish off a room, to the extent where I think I was about 10 days overdue with my first child. And I was up on a ladder putting gyprock up with my mother-in-law saying, get down, get down. But really the worst thing that could happen was that I had her and she was already overdue. So that's how we did things and learnt to do things ourselves, basically to save money, to keep our finances in check, to keep the amount of money that we borrowed along the way in check. And that was our second home. We stayed in there for 18 years.
The thing I remember about that home was that I really loved the fact that you could put a timber bench top on a white kitchen that was timeless, and that you kept in such good maintenance condition with lacquer that it always looked like a brand new kitchen top.
We actually, I don't know how many people knew, but we actually made that tabletop or the bench top out of packing crate.
I didn't know
Way
that.
before.
I didn't know that.
Before
pallets became popular.
Pallets became popular, and we made our vanity bench top out of the same crate.
Did not know that.
So we sanded it, and we actually applied marine grade lacquer.
Yes, yep.
So that's why it was so shiny.
It looked
and lovely.
amazing. And
Yeah, I
knowing
agree.
that now, I can't believe that.
Sorry.
That's all right. So that was great. And so then you stayed in that home as your family home and watched me crazily move in and out of homes as I renovated them.
Yes, you were making me tired.
And then something happened. You saw the opera show, and from that moment,
saw Robert Kiyosaki, and thought, owning a family home is just not enough. It's never going to move us to retirement. It's never going to make us wealthy.
help your children.
Yeah, so we bought the Rich Dad, Poor Dad books. Like I said, we really immersed ourselves in property education, and we jumped online with all the forums. And then realistically, within the 2 years of reading that book, we purchased 4 homes in New Zealand, 2 homes up the coast, and 1 in Queensland. 7 homes within.
Wow.
And we just took off running. We really did just take off running.
And from that, it was a mixture of being involved in buying groups and also going to seminars and learning,
Yes.
like we're trying to teach people now.
Yeah.
Teaching people, you learned from other people that had experience, that had success. And I've learned from you this side of the investment, the business side of investment, because we have never done any seminars or anything ourselves, but I have learnt from what you have told us about the different strategies and how they work and what works and what doesn't work. So that's great. And I'm really grateful that you're sharing your knowledge today with,
Well, I
with our
think
listeners.
that in the end, property investing takes energy, and it's not hard work. For example, the first time I thought I really want to do this full time and I want to be able to stop working and do it full time it was around about that time we'd bought the 2 homes in a town called Gloucester, a New South Wales country town. We'd bought them both after a conference about vendor financing, which is a scheme that works really, really well if it's done with integrity and both parties are up on the advantages and of it and fully aware of what they're getting themselves into. It's a great strategy, but it's not for beginners, that strategy.
And I was scared for you. When you told me about vendor financing, all I can remember thinking is you're too nice to be doing vendor financing if they don't pay their mortgage and you've got to kick the person out. I just knew you would not be able to do that.
Definitely. But funnily enough, being naive, we bought properties in this country town to do vendor financing, but I really don't think the population, nor at the time the wages and the income in that town supported that purpose.
So your strategy changed.
So we thought, okay, we've got 2 rentals here, but what happened to us in the meantime was, one, we were already financed and organised, and that'd be my biggest hint, is to get financially ready to go. If you're going to go and make offers on property, be ready to move fast. Because one of the homes we bought at 198,000 was a home that another couple was desperate for. They were emotionally attached and they really wanted it. So we were ready to move. We bought that house, made an offer, the real estate accepted it. But we were smart enough to know and not get emotionally attached that the couple might still make an offer on that house, and said to the real estate agent, if they still want the house, tell them that they can have it, but they're going to have to pay us more. They're going to have to pay us more. So we actually ended up flipping that house to those youngsters who really wanted it, and they're still there now apparently, all these years later. For $230,000 we sold it for. So that was a game changer for me, because at the time I was working part-time with my children in the police force, and my wage was only about $16,000 for the year, I think, back then.
Yeah.
And I thought, I've just made $17,000 after all
your
capital
costs.
gains taxes and real estate commissions, and we did everything legally and properly. And I thought, I've just done that. Realistically, it took me an hour to walk through the property and about an hour to fill out the paperwork. And I just did in 1 hour what I'd earned in a day, in a year.
So after that day where you flipped that property, that obviously changed your approach to how you were investing in property. How did you spend that money, that profit that you made?
Well, the other property that we bought in virtually the same week needed renovation. So we basically just used that cash to renovate the second property and add value to that second property.
Great. And what did you do with that second home? Did you keep that as an investment?
Yeah, we did. And to be honest, we sort of knew right from the start that the returns weren't all that great. In hindsight, looking back, it was one of those things that we should have just flipped and walked away from and taken the quick profits, because the market sat very quietly and still is a little bit quiet in that town. So it's not so much that we lost out of that property, because we actually made some money over the years, small amounts, but we could have done far better had we have had those finances to invest somewhere else. So it tied us up for quite a while.
But I know you still have property in that town, and different types of properties within the same town can be very different in what they yield.
Yes.
And one of your best investments is your other property, which is a commercial property. Is that correct?
Correct. We started because we basically ran out of money. We'd done a lot in a really short amount of time, and the banks, they weren't going to lend us any more. I mean, they probably could have lent us more, or we could have gone to private lenders or whatever, but we felt at risk, if we went into more and more debt. So we started to have to really look at getting properties that were beyond the mortgage repayments and all the council rates and the insurance and some maintenance costs, that the rent covered all of those sorts of things, because we just couldn't afford to pull money out of our pocket anymore. So we got very, very, very fussy about what we looked at. We also sold 2 of the homes that we'd bought in New Zealand. We sort of regrouped a little bit. We stopped and we regrouped and we downsized and looked at what was really working for us and what wasn't. And the one that we should have sold, we probably didn't. But anyway, in hindsight.
So did you go on and educate yourself about positive geared properties? How did you know how to find a positive geared property? How did you learn those skills?
Because we kept in contact with a community of property lovers and we just followed the latest information, and there was a real turn from the popularity of negatively gearing. And I don't have any issues with negatively geared property really, because that's how we started. Our first investment was jump on a plane, fly to Queensland, do all the things people say not to do. If we hadn't have dipped our toe in the water with that, we might never have,
kept going.
So and we learnt right from our very first one, but we were just getting tied up financially, and I heard that other people could keep on going and going and going if the cash flow was covering mortgages, and it just enabled them to do more. And I knew the secret was to build a portfolio of many, many properties, so that when things went up, that you didn't just get the gains from one or two properties, that you got the capital growth from maybe 7 or 8 or 9 properties.
Yep.
So that was our aim, was to try and grab some more homes.
And so then you were looking for properties not only with good rental yield,
Yes.
but in areas that might have good capital growth
Yes.
down the track.
Yes.
And that's been your successful key
Yes.
to keep buying more investment properties.
Yeah.
And then from there, for yourselves, for your own home, you took a very different strategy. So could you just go in a little bit about how you bought a property for yourself on a totally different scenario and what you did?
Well, you were talking before, when I was talking to you, you were talking about how sometimes outside influences you can't control. We had our house at Kurnell, and they'd announced quite a few infrastructure changes while we were there. One was the third runway that was being built while we were building the house and had an effect on our capital growth. And the second thing, or the cruncher for me that made Brett and I decide that it was time to sell and go, was when they built the desalination plant. And I knew that across the board that was going to devalue everybody's homes while it was in the media, and people were either for or against it, but there was a lot of chatter about it. And I just thought, we had homes held against that property as security, and lots of them, and we didn't want to be in a position where the value of our own home, the capital growth or the valuation was decreased so much that the bank was going to look at calling us in on loans or anything like that. So while the market was still buoyant, we moved. I mean, it cost us, I think we probably lost about $150,000 to $200,000 off the value that home would have sold for had they not have announced that desalination project. But hey, life goes on.
Yeah.
We're happy, we're healthy, we're well, the kids were great. So we decided to go to a more stable area. Kurnell's great, goes up high, goes down low. It does everything that every other suburb does, but probably too more extreme.
Yes.
And because we had houses securitized against our property there, I just couldn't ride the ride anymore.
Yeah.
So we went to a more stable place. And to do a bit of a catch-up, rather than just buy a house and settle, we decided to add value by knocking down and doing a rebuild.
Great. And I know that project was probably one of the most inspiring and easiest projects you could say you could do for your outcome for money, compared to doing a whole renovation on an existing home. So can you just explain exactly what you did? You bought an old house?
When we were looking, we bought an old house, I noticed that in the area, people were building display homes or project homes. And I was chatting to real estate agents quite a lot about how popular they were when it came to the point of sale. And what they were telling me was that people were just as prepared to buy project homes for the same amount of money that they were buying master-built homes. Now, a master-built home costs a lot more to build, is very solid. They have a reputation for being really, well done and stable and everybody's dream. But noticing that project homes could be done to an upmarket look, but the build cost was far less, there was a greater margin for profit. So we built a project home, because whether or not we decided to sell, we knew straight away the value of a property had sold over the street was up near the $2 million, and we bought the block of land at $860,000, so with stamp duty and costs somewhere around the $900,000, and there was a big margin in there for profit.
And I know from watching you do that project that you did a couple of small changes to the current design. So you paid above the standard cost of the project home, but in doing those changes, those design changes, adding a room and changing finishes, that the end result did not look like a project home. Nobody would have picked that home was a project home.
Yes.
And particularly with the fact that you kept an original garage and converted it to be a pool cabana, integrating the look of the project home made that home look like a master build.
And to be honest, we had something like 54 groups inspect that home. They were through that home at the first inspection, and one of them asked if it was a project home. None of the others guessed it.
No one else picked it.
So that was our aim, and I was so pleased to hear that from the real estate agent. And we really went into that home to build it as a family home, but we had, again, mortgaged quite heavily against it, and tempted by real estate agents who said, why don't we sell it?
You get a great
getting
price.
some inquiries
Yeah.
about it. And knowing that Brett and I were go-getters and were quite prepared to move, and we had the ability to do it again, they knew that we were soft targets. So we listed our house.
Good clients.
Soft targets. We listed our house and it sold very quickly. So yeah, we did quite well out of that. We really made, I think it's exactly, it was $346,000 profit after all costs.
And the advantage of that is that you did minimal work yourselves.
Lazy. Call us lazy.
No, clever. And still generated an amazing profit, which you then have now put into a very different type of property.
Yes.
To go to your next strategy. And I'd really like to share the journey of that property in another episode. But if you just explain to people where are you now living, what are you living in?
We're living in the biggest, oldest Mediterranean mansion in a really, really nice street. And luckily for us, all of the homes in that street are quite old, and every single one of those homes has been sold in the last 2 years as the generation of people move through. They're all going to nursing homes and going to live with family because they can't take care of themselves. And every house in this small cul-de-sac with water views is selling, and young people are moving in, and they're all value adding. Luckily for us, because they would drag
the prices
up in that street.
And with the Sydney boom on top of it, and the fact that you've bought a large home
and downsized our debt.
That's right. It has lots of opportunities for renovations and changes and investment opportunities. That has put you into a very good place for your next project.
Yes, that will be our next project. And we've had plans, DA plans approved at council to split that one big old house, completely renovate each side and convert them, or the big old house, to 2 4-bedroom townhouses. So that's what we'll do. We'll stay in one and rent the other, and we'll talk in more details about the difficulties we had in getting that through. It was quite a different project for the local council to deal with, a different sort of request. It was interesting.
I think you've done well. And I think it's interesting because now you're currently stepping into my shoes. You've now become the renovator of an old home, very large and challenging. But it's an exciting journey, and together we'll share everything we know and everything we're doing.